Hi everyone, welcome to the Lighthouse Church Sermon Broadcast. The title of today's message is Hitting the Wall and Pushing Through It. Hitting the wall is an expression that marathon runners use to describe a crisis moment in a marathon when they feel absolutely finished, exhausted, depleted, unable to carry on. Now, I'm sure none of us are running a physical marathon right now, but many of us are going through a prolonged period of lockdown, and some of us are starting to feel the strain. Some of us are struggling physically, perhaps from illness, loss of income, lack of food. Others are struggling emotionally, feeling confined, restricted, lonely, even depressed. As we realize that this could go on for much longer than we had hoped, we ask ourselves, how long can I keep going like this? Or even, can I keep going like this? Now, when a runner hits the wall, they have to make one of two choices. They either listen to the cries of their body and mind and stop. I can't do this anymore. Or they keep going in spite of all that they are feeling. I can do this. In order to complete the marathon, they have to keep going. So they set their focus on the finish line instead of the present pain. They take in some extra carbohydrates and they keep going. As they do, they push through the wall and they continue through to the finish line. Now, many have said that life is like a marathon, and I agree wholeheartedly. The Bible also describes the life of a disciple of Jesus in terms of a marathon, an endurance race. Listen to Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Notice the second sentence. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. God has marked out a race for each one of us to run. But it isn't a race that we can expect to just cruise through. It's an endurance race. To complete this race, we will need to persevere through difficult times. It's important that we understand this so that we don't think something's gone horribly wrong when our race gets difficult. Notice too the last sentence that tells us that it is possible for us to grow weary and to lose heart. We can get tired of keeping on. We can become discouraged. We can lose hope. We can hit the wall. So friends, if you are feeling the pressure, even feeling like giving up, don't think that this is strange or that this makes you a failure. This is part of running your race. Paul the Apostle knew what it was like to hit the wall as he ran his race. Listen to what he wrote in 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 8 to 11. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers and sisters, about the troubles we experienced in the province of Asia. We were under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we despaired of life itself. Indeed, we felt we had received the sentence of death. But this happened that we might not rely on ourselves, but on God, who raises the dead. He has delivered us from such deadly peril, and he will deliver us again. On him we have set our hope, that he will continue to deliver us, as you help us by your prayers. Then many will give thanks on our behalf for the gracious favor granted us in answer to the prayers of many. Here Paul describes feeling completely overwhelmed. They were not coping. The pressure was simply too much for them. They thought they were finished. They'd reached the end of themselves. Their most positive thought at that time was that even though they were going to die, God would one day raise them again. That was all they had faith for. But they held on to God and carried on, and God brought them through. I'm so grateful for Paul's vulnerability in describing his feelings. If this hero of the faith felt such intense feelings of despair, we should not be surprised if we also hit the wall. And we shouldn't feel ashamed, but rather we should speak to others about our struggling. Paul also described the apparent hopelessness of his situation. When they looked at themselves and at each other, they couldn't find hope. They simply didn't have what it took to get through their trial. Their circumstances also looked completely hopeless. They had to look to God. He was the only one who could bring them through. And this gives us a key to pushing through the wall. We must put our hope in God alone. Faith that endures doesn't look to ourselves or to other people. It doesn't look to our circumstances for a sign of hope. Enduring faith says, I hold on to God alone. I trust him regardless of what may happen. To quote Job, the ancient hero of faith, though he slay me, yet I will hope in him. And to quote the famous hymn, on Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. Paul also gives us a second key for enduring faith, as he thanks those who were partnering with them by praying for them. He says, as you help us by your prayers. God was responding to their prayers, helping them to push through. When we are hitting the wall, we may find it hard to pray positively and still be honest with God. Paul honestly thought he was going to die. So he was probably praying something like, Lord, we commit our souls into your hands. But the others were surely praying differently. They were probably praying things like, Lord, please deliver them. Please may their ministry continue. Going back to the marathon illustration, we are sometimes like a runner who's about to quit. We feel like we're done. We're praying for an ambulance. But then we hear some friends cheering. Come on, we know you can do this. And purely because of them, we keep running. And the next thing we know, we have broken through the wall. These are vital life lessons, friends. Let me recap what we've learned so far. Firstly, God has mapped a race course for each one of us. And we will need to persevere through difficult times in order to finish our race. We can grow weary, even lose heart when our race gets difficult. We must not look to ourselves or to others or to circumstances for hope. We must look to God. And it is okay to admit it when we are struggling. There is no shame in this. We need the prayers of others when we are struggling. So we should ask. Imagine we were going to learn marathon running. We would be wise to get ourselves a coach. So let's allow the Bible to coach us a little now as we learn something more about pushing through this wall. 2 lessons. Let's go back to our first text. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 to 3. Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Friends, Jesus is our head coach. He is the master of faith, the pioneer and perfecter. So we would do well to learn from him. And you know what? Jesus himself hit the wall. It happened the night before his crucifixion. His wall was facing the events that were coming: betrayal, desertion, wrongful arrest and conviction, mockery, flogging, and finally crucifixion and taking on the sin of the world. In the Garden of Gethsemane, he sweated blood as he thought about these things. And he asked God if he couldn't rather follow a different course. But after this agonizing time of prayer, he found new strength. He followed his course, and he finished the race. Our text tells us that Jesus looked past the agony. He looked to the joy that would follow the agony. This was going to be a horrific experience, but the end result was going to be so glorious that the agony was worth it. Paul describes the trials of our race like this. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 17. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Now remember, this same Paul had experienced agonizing trials. We've just read about them. But when Paul compared them with the glory that was to come, these trials seemed light and momentary in comparison. So when we hit the wall and we feel like we just can't go on, we need to look beyond our troubles. This is a tough part of the race, but the end is so glorious. Eternal glory waits for us at the finish line. So it is so worth it to push through. Okay, one more lesson. This one from Coach Paul. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 to 27. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last. But we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. No, I strike a blow to my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. This is tough coaching talk. Paul is challenging us to run to win, to build ourselves up so that we run a good race. Just as a marathon runner follows a strict training program and takes charge over his body, we need to train spiritually. We need to get spiritually fit and disciplined. Our spiritual life shouldn't be undisciplined or random, not like a runner running aimlessly or a boxer beating the air. We need to consistently do the things that build ourselves up spiritually. Be consistent in prayer. Be consistent in reading the Bible. Be consistent in learning from our leaders as they teach us. Be consistent in obeying Jesus' commands, in living his way. When we are spiritually fit, we cope far better when we have to push through our tough times. Phew, I think we've learned a lot today. Let me summarize our lessons for the race of life. God has mapped a race course for each one of us. And we will need to persevere through difficult times in order to finish our race. We can grow weary, even lose heart when our race gets difficult. We mustn't look to ourselves or to others or to circumstances for hope. We must look to God. And it's okay to admit it when we're struggling. There is no shame in this. We need the prayers of others when we're struggling. We must ask them. When the going gets tough, we need to look ahead to the finish line. Eternal glory awaits us that will make these trials seem insignificant by comparison. And lastly, if we are disciplined spiritually, our spiritual fitness will make us stronger to endure our trials. Friends, my prayer is that when our days on earth are over, we will be able to say something like Paul wrote to Timothy. 2 Timothy 4, verses 7 and 8. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. Friends, let's fight a good fight for Jesus. Let's run a good race for Jesus. And run it to the finish. Let's keep the faith, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Amen.